Hey, this is Lex from What the Craft, and today we're going to wrestle up a ruffle scarf. This scarf is super easy and quick, and it only requires a small amount of fleece, so it's cheap to make too. Plus, you can wrap the scarf around your head when it's really cold, and it looks kind of like a Queen Elizabeth style ruff. So let's get started. I've got my fleece folded in half, selvage to selvage, and I'm going to fold it again, which makes it even faster to cut, at least when you're using a rotary cutter. If you're cutting with scissors, you might want to stick with just the single fold. My scarf is going to be 6 inches wide, and I need 2 pieces to make the scarf, so I need a total of 12 inches of fleece, which is equivalent to 1/3 of a yard. You could go a little wider or thinner with your scarf, feel free to experiment. First, I'm going to even up this edge so I know it's really straight and clean, and that's really important if you're using scissors. Make nice, clean cuts. Then I'll slide my ruler over and cut my first 6-inch piece. Set that aside and then slide the rest over because I'm being inefficient today, and cut my second 6-inch piece. Now we'll take our 2 pieces of fleece and we're going to get them unfolded, and then we'll lay them right sides together. Trim off these selvages, and then we're going to sew the 2 pieces together along this edge. If you have a serger, you can serge the seam. If you don't have a serger, I would sew the seam with a narrow zigzag stitch and a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then trim the seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch, like so. If you have a serger, then you can serge all the way around the scarf at this point, overlocking all the raw edges and tucking in your thread tails. If you don't have a serger, you have a few options. You could leave the edges raw. Fleece doesn't fray, so that won't be an issue. If you want something a little extra, you could go around the edges with pinking shears, or you could hand embroider the edge with a blanket stitch. Whatever you choose, make sure that the edges at this seam match up nicely, and trim it up if needed. Now it's time to ruffle, or really more accurately, pleat. Just pinch some of the fleece between your fingers and fold it over and pin it down. Move a few inches down the scarf and repeat. I prefer my pleats to look somewhat random, so I like to vary which direction I fold them. And the same goes for how close the pleats are. I go for random. If you want to get all anal about it and make each pleat exactly the same size and then the same direction and then the same width apart, knock yourself out. My scarf will wind up being whatever length it winds up being, and that's cool with me. Again, if you want a scarf a particular length, then by all means measure everything out. The only thing I'm really keeping an eye on is that I want to pin as close to the center of the scarf as possible, since that's where I'm going to sew. And one other note is that when you get to the center seam, if you can try to maneuver it to the inside of a pleat, when you flip it over, it will actually be pretty hidden, and hiding seams is always a bonus. Here's our whole scarf all ruffled up. And if I lay it out flat and measure it, with the help of Serious Black of course, it's about 60 inches wide, which is a pretty good width. If you get to this point and you want it a little shorter, just add a few more pleats, or make a few pleats a little bigger, or vice versa if you want it a little longer. Now it's time to sew, and we're going to go right down the center with a straight stitch. If you'd be more comfortable marking the center first, then by all means do so. I'm a loose cannon, so I just wing it. Of course, make sure you backstitch at the beginning and end, and then before you know it, you're done. And you have this cool frilly scarf, the perfect gift for the holidays. Make one for everyone. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss any of my future tutorials. Check out whatthecraft.com for more tips, tricks, and kick-ass sewing patterns. Speaking of which, for a limited time, you can get my fingerless glove sewing pattern for free. Woohoo! The link is in the video description. And last but not least, be sure to drink your Ovaltine.